So here we have the Cadillac of external Amiga drives, the California Access CA-880. Get a good look. As you can see, it's one of the slim drives. Forgive me, but if memory serves, the only external Commodore drive was the Amiga 1010. At least that was the first one. And that thing was huge. This thing is extremely slim, barely larger than an actual PC floppy drive, and quiet, surprisingly quiet. It was definitely the quietest of all drives. So what was happening is I would plug this drive into the Amiga, and while it was plugged in, all it would ever give me is the workbench, insert the workbench disk icon. It wouldn't load the DF0, even if there was nothing in this drive. And I tried reconfiguring. There's actually an on-off switch on the back of this CA-880, and there's also a DF0, DF1 switch. I'll show you that on the back of the California Access floppy, and none of those seemed to make a difference. Although when I was fiddling with it, suddenly it started to work, which made me believe that something I just did fixed it, and I thought it was the switch, but when I went to go flip the switch back, it continued to work. So the only thing that switch will make this drive do or not do is it will make it so that this drive doesn't work. You can have it plugged in, everything else works, but this drive won't work if you have it switched to DF0. So I'm thinking that there might be something wrong with the circuit board or some kind of loose connection. So we'll be taking this apart further to see if we can find a loose solder, a dry solder joint or something. Okay, so obviously flipping it around and removing the screws. There's something I want to show you about the screws when I get them out. I had one of these. This one, again, is part of my cousin's lot of equipment that he lent me. Okay, so I want to show you something about these screws. If I can get a good, there we go. Two different lengths. Alright, so there are two stubby screws and the rest are these long ones. The stubby screws must go in the back of the case because there's a circuit board back here for running the drive, the interface board that connects to this cable and runs to the Amiga. And if you put the longer screws in, it very well may ground out parts of that board, and that would be bad. So FYI, pay attention to your screws. Okay, on to the disassembly now. I had quite a bit of an effort trying to get this case off previously, and the reason for that is because of the odd design. This metal case comes around and it folds underneath this bottom panel, and you're thinking, okay, well maybe the bottom panel just comes right off. No, it's actually got the circuit board attached to it with these points. So this bottom piece comes in just far enough to give mounting for these screws. There's a lip, that runs underneath here, and it makes it quite challenging to get this apart. And I'm thinking that maybe I'll modify something in this to make it easier next time. But it's actually you have to slide the electronics out this way, and then move them down and slide the whole drive out this way because of the threads. There's some self-tapped threaded area of the top of the case where these screws thread into. These screws here, the longer ones, thread right into the floppy drive. But these ones over here thread into the case, and the case has some, I'll show you in a minute. Okay, so what we need to do is try to slide the whole thing back. The drive only will go back a little bit. And then you're going to want to take the case and try to move it this way. And again, it's got the circuit board attached to it. And when you try to push it back, sometimes it doesn't want to go. So if that's the case, what you want to do is you want to take a screwdriver here and you want to bend this outside of the case out this way. Because what's happening is, well, I'll show you in a minute. There's pieces of metal that are grabbing on. So got this separated now. And let me show you, when you try to slide this back, it stops right there. And this is the same point in which this bottom case gets hung up when you're trying to get it out. But if you come front ways toward the front with this, it slides right out. Now for the meat and potatoes. So hopefully you can see this. This is the threaded part of the upper case, and it's got some threads that are, it's got a piece of the part of the metal is coming this way to give more threads, because if you just had it the thickness of the case, there wouldn't be too many threads in there. So they've created a stamped out area that comes up from there, thicker than my screwdriver, and it actually catches on whatever you're trying to slide past it. And so that prevents you from sliding the drive over it. But more importantly, especially when I tried to take this apart the first time, the other side of the case, the actual, let me see, I don't know what it was exactly catching on. Let's take a look at this part. I mean, again, you can't see what's going on, but that was catching somewhere here. Maybe it was catching just up on the circuit board, because I was trying to slide this portion back this way, and it was catching on that, and it would just, it just wouldn't go. It was the circuit board. I guess probably what it was is, yeah, you know what? Let's see. I think it was this, these pins from this connector catching on it. Possibly something on the other side as well. So like it could damage your circuit board. Okay, so let's unplug this drive. We're just going to show you, actually, I have an extra one of those right here. There's a switch on the back of this drive, which is really cool, making it like the most easiest drive to use for the Amiga, because most of the time it's a jumper that you have to move. But on this one, it's a switch. And I don't know if you can see that switch. Let me try to get as close as I can. So right here is a tiny little switch, and it is your DF0, DF1 switch. If I can get the light right. Yeah, you can see it now, right there. And I wrote on the top of the case right here, DF0 is in this position, and DF1 is in that position. I don't know if there's any other Amiga drive that actually has a little toggle switch that lets you switch between them, but that makes it super easy. Screws don't want to pop out by themselves. There we go. So we'll have to do the old, that's interesting, look at these standoffs, and they're sort of glued on there by something that's kind of got a rubbery consistency. Right, this ground screw has a couple of washers on it. I think one of them was underneath, between it and the board. This one here has 2 washers. This one over here has 1. That's interesting. So a screw with 1 washer here, a screw with 2 washers here, and a screw with 2 washers on the ground. Okay. Just taking a look at the wires here. There is one that's broken. There's a purple wire that's broken, but I don't know. Let's see. There's a purple one. Is that purple too? It's a different purple. There are colors that are solid, and then there's striped ones, I guess, so that they could differentiate. I guess I'll take that zip tie off and see, but yeah, you can see that this is where, to orient this correctly. So let's just take a look at this, see what catches. Yeah, so you can see how the threads, the threaded portion of these 2 screw holes are gonna catch on the solder joints, and frankly kind of ruin them. Take a look at that under higher magnification. Let me see how well we can do here. Alright, let's take a look at this under the USB microscope. We can see here that this pad toward the edge has been scraped by the frame, that threaded area of the case. It came across as I or somebody previous to me was trying to get it out of the case, and it just scraped this pad. No real damage there. Let's take a look at the rest of the board. On this side, the damage is much more significant. We have probably 3 damaged pads, and we have this circular area as though one of the screws was driven in to the board. Probably one of those longer screws was used in the wrong place and drove right into this board. Taking a look at it from a slightly different angle, we're just seeing what sort of damage we can see. I'm just going to take my multimeter and do some continuity tests to make sure that we're not shorted right now. I don't imagine that we are, because the drive is actually functional at the moment. Could it have been that the longer screw was in place when I was doing my initial tests? Quite possibly. Or it could be some of this damage that actually was creating a short. Or an open, for that matter. I'm just going to clean it off. I'm going to take a toothbrush and clean the area because it seems like there's a lot of dust. I want to make sure that there's no hair or something spoiling the view, making me think there's something there that's not. Now I'm going to take a hobby knife and see if I can see there's an area here where we might have a connection or a potential connection. So now I'm going to take my soldering iron and I'm going to add some solder to the pads, and then I'm going to take some solder braid and remove it again, just to make sure we've got everything off, and then if needed I'll add some solder. But this pad that I'm on right now, I believe it's just a via. It's not actually, doesn't actually have a component on it. Just to make sure we don't have any kind of short between the two pads, I'm just going to run my hobby knife in between this trace and this pad. I'm also going to go ahead and reflow solder on certain pads. Actually, you can see on the top row that there really isn't a lot of solder on those pads. It should sort of be like more of a blob on there. The bottom ones look better, the ones underneath it. So I'm going to go around the board and reflow a lot of solder joints just to make sure this thing stays reliable. You can actually see the leg of this pin is bent upwards. I believe that's a result of the case interfering when you try to remove this circuit board from the case. Yeah. Just take another look at our culprit here. As you can see, we've got 3 holes coming down here, but the rearmost hole actually has threads in it. The other 2 don't, because the drive that sits in here is threaded. So the 2 longer screws go through here and into the drive. But this last one is basically threaded itself. It is actually threaded, and it's deeper than the others, and that SOB gets caught on the circuit board when you try to take this thing in and out. I'm usually pretty gentle with things, and if I have a problem getting something apart and I ruin it, I mean, it could have been me that took it apart the first time. It could have been anybody else previous to me. I just don't know. So anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and file these guys down. Who knows, it just could be flashing, which is material that is left over from the milling process or drilling process or otherwise cutting metal process, material that is sticking up, that isn't necessarily desired. It doesn't form a function, it's just a byproduct. Little pieces of metal hanging out where they shouldn't be. Yeah. See, it's rough. It's rough, indicating that you know, you could cut your fingers on it or whatever if you drug your finger across there hard enough. And then it gets smooth. And of course, I'm probably going through the paint a little bit, you know, on the side, because I can't hold the file perfectly, but you know, if I do, I'm trying to avoid doing that, but it's not the worst thing in the world, assuming this is kept in a cool, dry place, which again is being part of the vintage computer hardware market or genre. You'd probably wouldn't store it as poorly as you would. Oh, those came right down. In fact, they came down so easy. I even wonder if it's, no, it's definitely steel, but it's a very mild steel. Well, that's unfortunate, because it means that it won't take much to strip those screws out. So take care when you're working. I believe that the steel on the floppy drive, however, the threads are going to be much deeper than these anyway, but I bet that steel's a little harder than this stuff. This stuff's very soft. It's very easy to file through it. But let's take a look at the difference here. Yeah. So I didn't go down all the way. There's maybe a millimeter left. Just trying to leave some thread in there. See if we can take a look to see how much, you know. Yeah, there's not a whole lot of thread left there, but we'll just be gentle. We'll put the screws in, you know, and not tighten them too much. Just make them snug, and I think we're good. All right, let's just make sure this thing, as is before I put it together, is working. Always a good judge. It's plugged into the Amiga, and sure enough, we are loading from DF0 properly, so it's not interfering at the moment. Again, I'm unable to be 100% certain that my fix, that my rework of the solder on the board and my fixes are the solution to the problem, but we definitely found something that could very well cause this problem, whether it's grounding to the case or shorting those two traces together. So let's put it together and give it a real test. Okay, whatever's holding these on, little rectangles, it's like a double-sided tape. You know, little rectangles of glue. But anyway, there's enough stickiness left in it to put this one back. This one had fallen off earlier. Let's see if we can get this on without too much trouble. I'm sure that guy's going to want to move the minute I poke him. But this isn't going to work. Putting the screw in ahead of time is not going to work because I got to get this connector and the switch through the back holes. Okay, looks like I can see all the way through the board. Actually went all the way down on that one. I don't think I'm ready to do that yet. No, I didn't go all the way down. It's still loose. Okay. Oh wow, this one had 3 washers on it. The middle one. It's going to be important how many washers in these because, you know, without enough washers on there, these screws are going to stick down through the bottom too far, potentially. Let me just check this ground spot to make sure it's raised. I'm not actually sure if this washer came out from above the ground washer here or on top of it, but feeling the area that the ground washer sits in it, I think it's raised, so, you know, with solder or whatever. So I think I'm safe putting them on top. That seems like a better idea. That's probably where they came from. Yeah, they're not going to screw in very far because they're going to kind of be flush with the bottom when you get them in, so they're not sticking out. Yeah, it's looking pretty good. Yeah, so I didn't really determine that there was a purple wire that's not connected. It's just been cut, and I don't think it's supposed to be connected because it didn't have a mate, and I actually wrote a B on here indicating that this wasn't working at one time, but I think we may have solved that issue. I guess we'll test the proper procedure to go ahead and test it at this point. Okay, yeah, that's working now. I think we're good because it just loaded the icon for this disk. Yeah, there it is. So X copy is there. I guess we can just open it to make sure. Now, did you hear how loud that was? Okay, so we're a lot closer to this drive now. I'm going to load it. Okay, now we're going to load up something off the California Access to see how much quieter it is. I don't even know if you can hear that. Yeah, I remember, I don't know if I mean, I did buy one of these, you know, back in the 1990 or whatever it was, and I just really liked it. It was, you know, I don't know if it was cheaper than the Commodore version, but it definitely wanted this one, and I don't remember exactly why. But it could have been the fact that it was silent, it could have been the fact that it was nice and small. That probably had a lot to do with it. You know, very sleek. Yeah, I never had one of these fail, and I have two here that have not failed. Anyway, let's finish putting this together. All right. So as I was saying, putting this back together is a little bit of a trick. That is before. Let me show you how you would do it if you hadn't filed down these things. You'd have to go this way. Take the disk out. You'd have to go this way with the drive. And then this away with the, yeah, this ribbon cable actually gets folded under, which, questionable. And this away. And it goes in nice and easy. If we were to screw it down and then take it back out, it would slide out nice and easy. When you're sliding it out, you definitely want to push down, you know, toward the case and slide it out so that we're not, I do have a little bit of, let's see, nope, it still won't go that way. So even after my mod, my filing down, you still have to do it that same way. But yeah, you just need to be careful not to push the case out and then slide it, because it'll drag that threaded area across those traces and cause a problem again. Okay. Now I have the drive sticking out a little bit. It's better to have it sticking out a little bit than too far in, because then I mean, you can push it this way, but if it's too far in, you can't pull it out. And you have to kind of align the drive. The only thing that's keeping it in place right now is the ribbon cable and power cable. And it's kind of loosey-goosey in there until you start putting screws in. So there's my two short screws. Sorry, my phone's making all kinds of notifications. Let's get a couple of these opposite ones in here loosely. Let's put all four loose. Right. And then these. And again, these ones, we're not going to tighten them down too far. We're just going to get them snug. So these are just snug. I'm not even really tightening the drive ones. A little bit more, I guess. So, you know, usually this is pretty typical. These little feet. Completely serviceable. All you need to do is put a dab of super glue on there and stick them on the proper way. Or you can actually probably just... Yeah, but they may not. No, I don't know. Let's seem to be okay. Come on. Yeah. Heat heat and time will make these things just, I mean, you could see the direction that they were in, you know, people pushing discs in. All right, so one final test. Oh, what I did off camera, which I didn't show, was I reflowed a lot of the solder joints. I added solder to a lot of the solder joints on the circuit board in here because a lot of them did not have enough solder. When you see the pin of a chip or a component coming up through the board and there's a cavity around it, you know, you can see where it goes down, and there's not even enough solder to bring it up to the level of the pad. You know, that's bad news there, because there's just not a lot of solder there, and it can be easily broken or have a bad connection. So I found maybe 5 of those, and other ones that just seemed like they could use more solder. You know, they were just a little lacking in the solder department, I guess you could say. So anyway, let's give this another test with Workbench. And one of my symptoms, the one with the please insert drive in disk and drive 0, please put Workbench back in. It's like it's acting like I ejected the disk while it was loading. That's what it was doing. So it happened when I had this attached and working and with a disk in it. So we're going to replicate that right here. So, and then the other symptom of it not loading at all, obviously that's okay now. There it goes, it's accessing this other disk, loading its icon presumably, and there it is. Just so that by the time Workbench is loaded, it shows all the icons for all the disks that are inserted, which is, you know, that's what you want. Yeah, so eject, insert. So quiet. And I think we have a fixed California Access CA-880 floppy drive. The Cadillac of Amiga floppy drives.